Welcome to my live stream. I'm doing a streaming session of workout and write where I do dictation. I've got my headset right here. I put my headset on. I'm walking on my treadmill. This is a real normal common thing to me because sitting in a chair for many hours kind of busts my backside. So what I do is I crank up my treadmill, but I just put it down to about 0.6 miles an hour. And what I use is dictation. I love working and writing on my books. That's what I do. I'm an author, Linsdau.com, and I do dictation and I do writing. The other day I was in Panda Express and I started The Bone Road. That's my next book in the SERA Archives, where there's a lot of adventure. My first in series, right? The Last Echo, super fun and adventurous. Let me tell you. Pretty sweet action adventure all the way. The Bone Road, just as good, different location. That's the thing. My character is globe hop all around the world. And in my Grant Coulson series, the first book, Magellan Deception, that's a wild adventure that has multiple globe hop. But these guys here, The Last Echo, all my shorter stories, the SERA Archives, are all one location sort of things. So hopefully I don't fall off my treadmill here and then have an entertaining thing on YouTube. It's a thing. So I'm just going to start my dictation here, and I need to put my microphone on so you can actually hear me, because I realized I didn't put that on. So it's kind of a bit of an operation here, thinking about getting my other microphone, but then there's more gear and all that hoopla. So, oh gosh, let's get it going. So right now I'm in chapter 2 of The Bone Road, and Grant has just fallen down a pit, and his friend Luis and Dr. Zhao are trying to get him out, and they just discovered that Grant had fallen into a pit and opened it up. And that's the thing. We got to get to the end of this chapter where Luis jumps into the pit, but he can't just jump in because he doesn't want to get hurt. Search and rescue never become part of the problem. So what I'm going to do is get my dictation program going here. All right, record and transcribe. Now I have never done live streaming, dictating on a treadmill like ever. I'm looking over my computer to see what's going on. So this is going to be pretty funny. See, Bone Road, Chapter 2. Okay, wait for that to come up for a moment. Oh, great. One moment, finish. Okay, I need to switch things around a bit because I need my outline so I can actually follow my outline. It's a little bit of an operation here. Lots of octopus stringing, cables and all this, all while trying to not eat it walking on a treadmill. I wonder if this will be one of those TikTok videos where I eat it. And by the way, I feed my TikTok channel now too, so if you really want to see what that's like, it's pretty entertaining. All right, so let's do, that was junk. Dictate again. Okay. Bone Road, Chapter 2. Okay. Luis ran over to the sand buggy that they had driven over to the tomb entrance with, and he quickly fired it up and pulled it as close as he dared to the pit where Grant was trapped. Zhao immediately went into the back of the buggy and pulled out a climbing rope and started getting the gear in there, and while Zhao was getting everything ready, Luis hooked up all the hardware and let's see, Act 3, where am I? And got everything ready to hook it up and see if they could get down and rescue Grant. They had a 11mm climbing rope, so it was good and heavy duty, and Luis yelled down, "Hey Grant, are you clear to receive a rope?" And they heard Grant's voice a little bit stronger now that he had fallen down the pit and wasn't seriously hurt, and he yelled, "Yeah, I'm good. Just shocked to heck to fall in some place. This is pretty wild in here. It must be connected to the tomb entrance that we found." And Luis yelled back, "Perfect, no problem. Sending down the rope." And he yelled, "Rope!" and flung it over the side while Zhao finished up getting the buggy ready and prepping any gear that they needed. And Luis spent a moment getting his harness on, and Zhao looked at him and said, "Hey, be careful down there. We have no idea what could be down there. Either biologics or traps. I mean, no one ever knew this place even existed, so please be mindful, my friend." Luis and Zhao shook hands, and then Luis hooked up his harness, and then instead of just jumping off, he asked Zhao just to double check it. You always do that climbing. And they verified that all his equipment was ready and that the rope was tied securely to the sand buggy. And Luis began the slow walk to the edge of the sand pit. And he was glad that he didn't try and walk any closer without the rope, because it started crumbling and he actually fell to his knees more than once. And Grant yelled up, "Hey, definitely pouring some sand down there, be careful." And Luis said, "Don't worry, I'm all tied in," and began rappelling down into the pit. It wasn't that far of a big distance, but just the idea of falling down and not breaking a leg, an arm, or even worse injury was a big deal. As Zhao stood there, getting as close as he dared, he saw Luis's head slowly disappear into the pit where his friend Grant had just disappeared a few minutes before. Nice. Okay, that was pretty good. All right, so we've got that. Drop into the darkness. And I've got my outline, but I realized I got to have a little bit more drama and lead into this. So these shorter novels are definitely potato chip size. I make them so they're super exciting. You can read a little bit, and then you can flip forward a couple pages and realize, wow, I can read another chapter. And that's the whole goal here, is to get you to read as many chapters and make you stay up as late as possible. Now, I'm going to check my text messages because I'm sending people stream links here. Always fun. Alrighty, stream link live session. Perfect. Good. Okay, back online. So, Bone Road Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a warning from the past where Grant and Luis start looking around the pit. So you're just going to hear it develop as I dictate it here. Record and transcribe. Bone Road, Chapter 3. Grant looked at the back of Luis as he continued down into the pit. It wasn't a very far drop, just 15 feet, but far enough that if he fell uncontrolled, he'd probably get killed. And Grant was very lucky that when he got sucked down by the sand pit, there was a huge pile of sand for him to land on. But once the pit exploded and opened up, meaning that the ceiling had collapsed, Grant was able to get away and not get killed. And that's also what opened the entrance to the tomb. As Luis landed, he cut the slack and unhooked his harness and looked around and ran over to his friend who was sitting in the corner, keeping out of the way in case anything fell down. "Grant, how you doing there, buddy?" Grant smiled and looked back up. "Oh, certainly could be worse. I only got swallowed by the desert. Not as bad as when we almost had radioactive dust inhalation in our mission, The Last Echo." And Luis quipped back, "You're right, that could have been far, far worse. Can you stand up?" Grant put his hand out, gripped Luis's wrist, and they both stood up, smiled and embraced. These men that had been friends for over 30 years knew each other's nuances, but when you have close calls like that, they definitely consider, hey, a little more bro love doesn't hurt the situation. So they began getting a plan because Luis had brought down ascenders to get out of the pit so they could both ascend out, and they didn't have any way to really put pulleys or rigs on the rope because they weren't sure how sharp the edges were, and they could certainly drag them up, but they didn't want to have anything more collapse on them on a surprise. Zhao yelled out, and they could barely hear his voice over the wind that was whipping now. "Are you guys okay?" Luis yelled back, "Yeah, we're good, don't worry. Grant's fine, and we just need to get ourselves set." Okay. So as Grant and Luis started prepping their climbing gear, they stopped for a moment and looked around as the light filtered into the location, and then they both froze. Across the walls of the pit they were in, it wasn't just a stone sinkhole in the middle of the desert, something maybe created by limestone and by some ancient sea, but rather the walls had inscriptions on them. I'd spell this right. Khwarezmian script. I don't know why I choose these crazy locations in the Gobi Desert and the Kharez Desert. It's crazy. And as their eyes began to adjust to darkness, they both went cold. All along the walls, into the deeper spaces, were skeletons scattered. Each had their armor, and they sat covering their faces. Others were curled into the fetal position in throes of death, as though they had died in horrible agony. Grant looked at Luis, and his friend looked back, and they said, "Well, I guess this got a lot more interesting, didn't it?" Let's see. Grant yelled up to Zhao, "Hey buddy, looks like we got some interesting stuff down here." Zhao yelled back, "How's that?" And Grant began explaining what they were seeing. All the bodies, the skeletons, the scripts on the wall, chunks of armor, and then deep into the space, they actually had a glint of light. And Grant asked Luis, "Hey, you got your flashlight?" And Luis pulled it out, shined it down the tunnel that they could see into now slightly, and both were shocked. There, deep inside this tunnel, in the pit that they didn't even know about, stood a sarcophagus, not quite long enough to hold a body, but big enough to hold something interesting. Now, normally they would retreat, come back with a lot more gear. The biggest problem was that a storm was brewing, and it was dumping huge amount of sand and shifting the dunes all out in the desert. So they know that if they left, they would probably have to bring heavy excavation gear, which isn't a big deal, but they were on a special envoy mission with China, and even though SERA worked with China and China was one of the signatories, they were always under somewhat of a tense relationship. Luis yelled back up at... Ooh, scratch that, that's a mistake. Luis and Zhao would have radios. They wouldn't yell. That's a mistake, I need to correct that. So Luis clicked the radio and told Zhao, "Hey, we found something interesting. Give us a few minutes. Go hide out in the sand buggy and get out of that storm." Zhao replied, "No problem, let me know what you find." And the two men mounted up the flashlights that Luis brought down, and they shined them down the tunnel and walked towards the sarcophagus. Nice. Okay, that's cool. All right. Circle from the container, warning from the past. Okay. Let's see how we're doing here. Oops, clacking my microphone. No, I use these Sennheiser microphones, and they're lavaliers, but I've got this lavalier up to my mouth so I can actually speak much quieter. I'm just projecting my voice for this live stream a bit more, but usually I talk really quietly. So hopefully you can hear me over this, because when I do a lot more dictation, I kind of kill my voice, so I've learned to speak very quietly, but I'm speaking loud enough for you to hear me. So hopefully this will work out. I have no clue. Oh, hey, they've got comments. Cool. I have a class. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Enjoy the class. Oh, yeah, Nancy, yeah, the humming is from the treadmill I'm on. So you can't see it right now, but I'm actually walking on a treadmill because you can see me strumming along here. So yes, there's going to be a little buzzing and humming, and that's perfectly normal. This is not my normal streaming setup. I thought I would do something just kind of interesting and different. Let's see. Yeah. So hopefully not too annoying, but we'll forge on. Okay, so in chapter, let's see. That was part of chapter 2, chapter 3. I'm already kind of blowing out of my script here in my outline, but I realized I need some tidbits to get people into position. So now I'm going to do chapter 3. Shoot. Okay, I need to write some notes here down. Chapter 3. Grant's rescue. Discovery of the sarcophagus. Cool. And then that's chapter 3A and chapter 3B. Warning from the past. Okay, good. And now I'm just going to rename this chapter. Can I rename this thing? How do I rename the chapters? I don't know. I won't mess around with that. Perfect. Record and transcribe the next chapter. Chapter 3B. Warning from the past. Bum bum bum. Okay. The tunnel swallowed the light of their lamps. The particular walls in this space were quite dark, so no matter where they shone their LED headlamps, there was barely any light reflected back, and it made it actually quite disorienting. Luis led into the tunnel because Grant was still struggling a bit, but he wasn't doing too bad. And after they traversed the distance, they were mindful to look for any traps or anything. Not that they expected anything dangerous in this location, but the way that the soldiers, the skeletons, had looked, it didn't look like a good situation. That was not a normal burial location. It looked as though something horrible had happened to the men before. Luis tried the radio back to Zhao, and all he got was static, so they were doubly on guard because that stone completely crushed the radio signal. They half wished that they had one of their SERA repeaters, the SERA repeaters, so they could communicate, but they didn't expect to find anything, just a quick extraction, recover Grant, and then move on. But now they realized that they are going to need a lot more gear, but they were under time pressure. Let's see. Grant motioned around with his headlamp, and he took it off because the headlamp, when it's beamed straight from your head actually flattens out the light. So he took his headlamp off and shined it sideways across the stone, and he gasped. Luis's head snapped back at him and said, "What's wrong?" And Grant said, "Look, this place is completely covered in script. Did you happen to bring a LEX4 translator?" Luis smiled as he dug into his backpack and pulled out the small portable unit. "Of course, my friend. I wouldn't go anywhere without it." Grant motioned to have Luis pass it over, and he punched up the little unit. It fired up in mere moments, and he began scanning the script. And to his surprise, it gave a very low confidence measurement that it knew the language. This is a language that they hadn't seen before. Grant called back to Luis, who was standing closer to the sarcophagus now. "You wouldn't happen to have a Rosetta Stone?" And Luis replied, "Why is that?" The Lex 4 is not really picking up the language. "Did you happen to load the packs for China?" And Luis said, "Yeah, actually, we did, but that script looks almost Middle Eastern. Look at the men here, they definitely are not Han Chinese. I mean, this location's over 2,000 years old." And Grant realized, "Oh, you're right." And he began keying through the old language database and told the Lex 4 to make a general approximation of what they were looking at. Grant slowly scanned over the rock surface that was chiseled with the language, and soon the device started displaying that they were actually looking at an ancient dialect of Persian, that is Iranian in modern parlance, for the location. And the translator was still struggling because the lighting wasn't very good. Grant was trying his best, but that chiseled script wasn't coming across. But he came across one word that made him freeze. "Warning. For all those who enter here, you will never leave." Right. The entire army perished, and I am the last one. The moment Grant saw that on the display, he realized that they were in danger, and he looked over at Luis, who was just about to touch the sarcophagus. "No, stop." Luis's gloved hand hovered just above the sarcophagus, and he looked at his friend. "What's wrong?" Grant replied, "We better be careful. This looks like something that killed these men." "Are you kidding me?" Grant replied, "The Lex 4 didn't give me much to go on, but there's a warning by the last man standing, ironically enough, that this isn't a place to trifle around." And Luis looked back at the sarcophagus and realized, "You're right, this thing actually has a weird seal. It almost looks like some sort of dull metallic rim around the bronze." And he took his knife out. He flipped out his Benchmade infidel, his mini infidel, snicked out the blade and then poked gently at it. The metal was unbelievably soft. "That looks like mercury amalgam. Not the ones that are in your teeth, but it's very soft. That was actually used to seal things way back when." And Grant said, "Oh, that's not good. That means they sealed that sarcophagus for a reason." Right, so here we go. They fell into the pit, there's a sarcophagus closed, there's a warning on the wall, and just before Luis cracks the seal, they realize, hey, there's real danger in there. So that's how I write my chapters, is literally doing this dictation. Now, this sounds kind of rough, and when I finish the dictation, I copy it into, let's see if I can show you here. Let's see if I can, where's my microphone? Yeah, let's see if I'll show you here. So you can actually see my dictation right here. Let me look at OBS, there you go. You can actually see the live dictation I've got there. And it's a bit messy, but what I found is the emotional wear of actually typing this stuff out versus dictating. I can dictate so much faster than I can typing that it's totally worth it. Plus I get some of the nuance of thinking, and my dialogue is way better than when I type it, so that is a huge thing. Let's see, so how are we doing here? I think we got a 26-minute live stream. Oops, got a comment on here. Nancy asked a good question about the sarcophagus, if it's standing up or lying down. That's a detail I got to figure out. So I'm going to make a note about that. I use Scrivener for my writing. And I hit done. I need to add chapter 3A. And then chapter 3B. And then in chapter 3B, question about the sarcophagus. Terrible word to spell. Is it standing up or laying down? There's a couple details I need to figure out. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Let's see, sarcophagus laying up or pointing down. Perfect. Okay. I think I'm going to stop the live stream right now because I need to eat lunch. And I've got some good dictation down just to show you how I do this. It's definitely a process, a labor of love, which of course also helps pay the bills. But while you're at it, if you want to check out my book, The Last Echo, links below in the comments and also in the video description. And I also have a link to my book, The Shepherd's Code, and to my free book, Black Ice, where you learn about Grant Coulson's origin story and the origins of SERA and the universe that I'm creating for you. Thank you very much for watching. Check out links in the description and in the comments, and I'll see you next time.